Hey guys, welcome back. I might be jumping the gun just a little bit, putting this video out mid-December because we still have 2 weeks left, but I wanted to go ahead and film this video, the best books of 2024. I see that a lot of other people on YouTube are already putting out their best books of the year also, and this just so happens to be a really good time for me to film. I wanted to film a lot yesterday, but I could not make it happen, so today my kids have early release day. I do have a couple hours, the house to myself. I'm glad that I've been putting these videos together because as I was approaching the end of the year, especially after my terrible October reading month, and then just trying to get back into the swing of things through November, I'm surprised I even read 6 books in November because I was so incredibly busy. It's like I'm approaching the end of the year feeling like I feel kind of sad because I don't have like one book that I'm super excited about that I can't stop talking about, I can't stop recommending. I don't really have that this year. However, now that I look at these books that I have collected that were highlights of my year, I'm thinking this has been a really good year actually. I think what else is kind of on in the back of my mind is that I did end up DNFing a ton of books. And you're gonna have to watch that video. I ended up DNFing like 44 books. That was another big thing that I wanted to do this year, is not push myself through books that I just know I wasn't going to enjoy. And that was very successful. I guess let's just go ahead and get into the books that I feel were the highlights of my year. And we're first gonna start off with a series. The Throne of Glass series by Sarah J. Maas. And I'm only holding up the first book, but I ended up reading all 7 books, and it was an incredible journey. Now, this is actually the last series that I have read, despite this being the first series that Sarah J. Maas wrote. And I will say that it does feel like a debut series. The first 2 books follows Celaena Sardothien, and she is an assassin, but she had been caught, thrown into prison, but she gets released from prison as long as she participates in these games and trials. Then the story goes on. So it's almost like she started the series off wanting to tell a tale of assassins, but then at some point she changed her mind. And I think it's because she didn't expect it to just blow up and get really popular. So it's like she decided to kind of take a left turn and go a different route and turn this into a fairy style story with fairies. And so it definitely ended up a completely different place than it seemed to be starting. But it was still incredibly good. I adore Sarah J. Maas as a writer. I think that her second series, A Court of Thorns and Roses, which is the series that I read first, is my favorite series of the 3. And then also Crescent City, I read those 2 books. And I want to finish the last book in that series before I really can pinpoint which one is my second favorite or last favorite. Other things that make this feel like it's a debut series is there are certain concepts about, I don't know if I want to call it the magic system, a little bit of the magic system, as well as the rules for mating bonds. That seems to kind of have changed from this book to the next book. It's almost like she was finalizing her decisions on what should be the ground rules for this concept. So that was kind of interesting to, I guess, compare this series to that series. What made this reading experience so incredible as well is that I had some in real life friends to share the experience with. We ended up starting a whole a group chat to share our reading experience, share which books we're at. One person had already read all the series, so there's 2 of us kind of at different points trying to play catch up. So that was just really fun to just kind of be like, oh my god, I just got to this point, or oh my gosh, I love this character, or I'm really rooting for this romance. And that just made the experience so much more fun. There was another girl, she kept sharing a bunch of different TikToks for different characters, and I really liked that and sharing all that. And then in my city, we have a Sarah J. Maas themed ball that they're doing this month, and I completely missed it and I didn't get my tickets. but that's also due in part to the fact that I didn't really have anyone to go with. Now, I know that a couple of my friends are going, but they're going with dates, and I didn't know the vibe. Like, is it going to be weird to go solo? I didn't want to go solo and then expect them to like hang out with me because I wasn't really invited. Maybe I'll go next year and I'll try to plan like a friend to go with me, so I'm not put in that position. Some other downsides to this series is that there's some books that were really strong, a lot of action. I would say Throne of Glass, the second one, Crown of Midnight. Heir of Fire slowed down a lot. It was a little bit more difficult to get through, as well as the 5 novellas from the Assassin's Blade little book. And then Queen of Shadows is probably my favorite book of the series. And then you have their tandem read between Empire Storms, Tower of Dawn and Empire Storms. I honestly can't remember which one's which. One of them follows a specific character that is not very fun to read from, although I can see why it was kind of an important book. And then the other one really follows a different group of characters. That one was really good. Those were the kind of like happening at the same time books. The last one, Kingdom of Ash, that book in particular had a lot of moments where it would just really drag on, a lot of conversations about war maneuvering and not a lot of action, just kind of planning things, getting worked up for the final battle, which was not a great time. However, when we would get to something that happened where like certain characters would like have a conversation or a romance would start flourishing, or all of those moments were so good that it almost makes it all worth it. You just get so attached to her characters, and Sarah J. Maas can write angst in such a good way. The hardships, the high stakes, the friendships, sacrifice, all of those things throughout the whole series are so good. The next one is a manga series, which is Spy Family. And I actually have only read volumes 1 through 5. I'm kind of at the mercy of waiting for my library to get them. My son and I started reading them together, so that was really fun. We also started watching the TV show on Netflix, but we didn't get to finish that one because we didn't get that far into that because we don't have Netflix anymore. We now have Disney Plus. Regardless, it is an ongoing manga series that I am absolutely loving. This follows... Why am I drawing a blank on his name? The guy. He is like this special agent, right? And he has this job to do. He needs to infiltrate this prep school to get close to this guy, to get some intel. So he has to go undercover, and then in order to do that, he decides that he needs a student. So he goes to an orphanage, picks up this little girl, Anya, who nobody likes. They couldn't wait to get rid of her, and he's like, okay, fine, I'll take her, because he's just like kind of in a hurry, you know? He's like, okay, fine, I'll take her. Well, she's definitely a handful. He was not expecting to, you know, have a child, and now she has to get really good grades in order to make friends and schmooze with the other guys. She also has like a special gift so she can kind of tell what people are thinking. And then he realizes, okay, well, I'm also going to need like a wife, and Anya needs like a mother. They need to look like the nuclear family to fit in with this prep school. So he goes out and finds this girl named Yor, and she has like a secret identity. Anya has a secret identity. He has a secret identity. And then also Yor comes with her brother, who's very protective, and his name is Yuri. And he is also got a secret identity, which works against our main guys. He's like on the opposite side, like the opposite side of the coin of our main guy's secret identity. And it is the funniest thing ever. And part of what makes it so incredible is the illustrations, because the expressions on their faces, especially Anya's, is to die for. The situations that they get themselves into, it is all just so good. I can't talk about this one enough. All right, some other books that I also rated 5 stars. We have Lost Lake by Sarah Addison Allen. I did also feature this in my reading vlog over the summer. And every time I read a Sarah Addison Allen book, it is just pure magical, whimsical. It just fills me with so much joy. This one might be one of my favorite Sarah Addison Allen books. It's either this one or Garden Spells, but this one is wholly a thing of its own. Garden Spells reminds me a lot of Practical Magic, so I just think for originality's sake, this one might be a little bit higher than that one, but this one was incredible. This one follows a single mom, and she's also a widow, and she goes to this lake house that she hasn't visited in a really long time, but her life is about to change because of the grief that she's been going through. She feels very vulnerable, and she has basically allowed her mother-in-law to kind of assume control of a lot of things in her life because she just feels, she's just going through a lot of things, right? So she packs up her daughter one weekend right before they move into her mother-in-law's house for a last, I wouldn't say like a last hurrah, but just for whatever reason, for the reasons that they explain in here, she just decides, okay, before our lives change and we leave everything and we go live with her, we're going to go to this lake house, because I always remembered it being a really special place. The other characters are also renting their little cabins around the lake house. All of the visitors of this lake house, all of the visitors of Lost Lake, sorry. So they go to Lost Lake. So she wants her daughter to experience that. So she and her daughter pack up, they go to Lost Lake, and while they're there, you get to meet all the other characters who were like seasonal people. They drop in for the season to kind of get away from their lives. You also realize that Lost Lake might not be there much longer. This might be their very last summer because there are these developers coming in and everything's going to change. So as you're getting to know these characters, you're realizing that they all have their own stories of grief or loss or feeling lost. They all end up finding something in this space together. And it is just such a heartwarming, wholesome story. And it's all very metaphorical. And that's one thing I just love about Sarah Addison Allen's writing style, or her storytelling ability, because she can write these like stories. There's also filled with an undercurrent of metaphor and magical realism. It's just so good. I have now read 4 of her books, and I still have about 3 more on my shelves that I need to read. The next one is Of Mice and Men. I think that this one I actually have talked about a lot ad nauseum, and this year I actually read 3 John Steinbeck books, but this one remains at the top. And I think one of those reasons is because back in school, I remember that I had to read this book for school, and I hated it. I hated it with a fiery passion. And through the years, the only thing I could remember is just how weird it was that Lenny would carry around mice. And of course, I think that being the thought that I always remembered is because of my age group when I had to read this book, and also because when I was younger, I didn't enjoy reading. Reading had always been a point of contention for me because I really struggled reading when I was younger. So like when I was first starting to learn to read. So then throughout school, they just never made it any more pleasing. And then you don't like reading already, and then they give you these books that are not fun to read, Now that I'm older and more wise about the world and wise about history, book hits so completely differently. And it's about these 2 guys, George and Lenny, and they are laborers. So they kind of just go around from farm to farm throughout California. Yeah, throughout California, getting work on farms. Well, they end up having to jump ship a lot and change different farms because Lenny kind of gets themselves into trouble. Lenny is a man who is, in this book, they call him simple, like simple-minded, because he doesn't really know his strength. He doesn't really know how to be an advocate for himself in a lot of ways. And George realizes that guys like him at this time in history, life is not good to people who are simple in this time. And George ends up sacrificing a lot. He sacrifices jobs. He sacrifices a personal love life so that he can be there to help Lenny and look after him. It's kind of a tough read because George can say the most mean things to Lenny, but then Lenny doesn't really hold on to them. He wants acceptance. He looks to George because he knows George looks after him, and then the ending is just gut-wrenching. And it's like it feels gut-wrenching, but then you're also like, it makes you think, you know what I'm saying? So anyways, this book is small but mighty. It is incredibly good. John Steinbeck has become a favorite author of mine now, and I look forward to reading 2 of his large books next year. The next one is The Boy in Striped Pajamas. I think that this is more written for like a middle grade audience, because you are following a young boy who, I want to say his name is Bruno. Oh, Bruno is a 9-year-old boy. And then even the back of this is that it's not really made for 9-year-olds. So it is a really hard-hitting book, which I did not expect at all. This is about a young 9-year-old boy. I think he is Polish, or they live in Poland. And his dad works for the Führer, and he is quite higher up in the ranks, and one day his dad gets a new job and he is called to move to Germany with his family and uproot his son, and his son is very upset about this. In fact, I feel like the narrative is a little bit unbalanced because we go through a huge portion of the book where Bruno is just arguing about moving and not wanting to move and everything. So anyways, I felt that a critical side, that part was probably really long. But anyways, Bruno is incredibly upset. He's gonna miss his friends. And when they move into their new home, there's all these rules put in place. There's no children to play with, and all he wants to do is have a friend. He's bored. One day he goes out and he does make a friend, but this friend has striped pajamas and he lives on the other side of the fence. And he goes out there every day and hangs out with him, and they talk, and he's found that he has a friend. Okay, I can't say anything else about the plot. I've probably mentioned this before if you've watched some of my other videos, especially the series I'm doing where I'm talking about why specific books are my favorite, themes, attributes that they have that have made them my favorites. This is told from a 9-year-old boy who doesn't understand politics. He doesn't understand religion or race or any of these things. He is so innocent. He just wants a friend. So he does not look at the boy in striped pajamas and think all the terrible things that the adults think about Jewish people. I feel like that part is like, I guess I love that, especially in this story, because you are not born to think bad things about other people, other races. Those kinds of things are put onto you by society as you grow up, and you're surrounded by people who think this way. That's when you start thinking that way too, and you're kind of brainwashed to thinking that way about other people. There's a fear put into you, but little kids don't see the world through that lens. They just see that all people are people. And I think that's what I love so much about having a young boy's perspective in the story. The ending will destroy you, by the way. The next one is The Dark Descent of Elizabeth Frankenstein by Kristen White. This book is a retelling of Frankenstein, but I thought that it was so incredible. The story is told from Elizabeth, who was brought into the Frankenstein home when Victor was really young. His parents could tell that Victor was kind of different, and he had a difficult time kind of fitting in, and I think at times he was a little too much for his parents to handle, so they thought of bringing kind of like a nanny, and his family was really wealthy. So in came Elizabeth. She's a little bit older than Victor, and she had her own stakes of her reasons, her past, where she had to make this work because the alternative of not being with the Frankensteins was not very good for her. She could see that for her life, this was going to be the best option for her. She had to make this situation work. Despite how odd Victor was at times, she had to pacify him. She had to make sure that Victor was pleased with her, because if Victor said to his parents or whatever, like, this isn't working or whatever, then they could toss her out and get someone new. So she found herself really kind of giving Victor whatever he wanted just to make him happy. As we go further into the story, and we all know what happened to Victor Frankenstein and the kind of man that he became, so she reaches a point in the story where she is wondering if she wasn't a part of why he is the way that he is. This story follows Victor Frankenstein from the time he was little to the time the original Frankenstein by Mary Shelley kind of comes to a conclusion. And it's also not a huge book. This book was so incredible. I just absolutely love this story so much. There is a little, I want to say it's an Easter egg. It's a nod to the original author of Frankenstein. I feel that this story just seamlessly explains and gives Victor a backstory. And it's so good. It's so good. I want to know what Mary Shelley herself would think of this story. I bet she would like it. I think that something that makes this book really, really stand out is that it's deeply psychological. And that's not really something I get from a lot of young adult retellings that I've read in the past. And so this one really, really stands out as being incredibly strong. The next one I read was I'm Glad My Mom Died by Jeanette McCurdy. This is among one of the first, I think this is my very first celebrity memoir that I read, and I thought it was so good that I ended up picking up a few more, and it just validated my feelings that celebrity memoirs probably are not my thing. This one, however, was incredible. Jeanette McCurdy was a child star in a couple of Nickelodeon productions that were directed by Dan Schneider. Now, I must preface that I went down quite a long rabbit hole of watching all of the content on YouTube about Dan Schneider and Ariana Grande and the Nickelodeon scandals and what happened to, Josh and whatever. All these shows, to be honest, that were on Nickelodeon have similar situations where there was definitely misconduct. And in particular, in like the shows that Jeanette McCurdy was on and with Ariana Grande you'll see featured the most with her clips from things that they aired in public, and you see the compilations of just all of this really weird foot stuff. So I think adults, we can look back at these episodes and be like, they had editors, they had a whole team of people approving this conduct for foot fetish people. It's really goofy if you're not like into foot fetish things, but if you're really into like the foot fetish thing, you're straight up publishing porn for those people, I think, with young girls. And that is so messed up. And a lot of these kids, they were kids at the time. They didn't know what they were doing. They were just doing their job, right? And I think that they can look back at this now and they know, in conjunction with the kind of people that these people were, putting it all together, I think they're looking back being like, oh my God, I was made to do these things without even, just the psychological mess up that does to them. So yeah, there's just a lot. So I went through the whole rabbit hole of learning about all of this stuff before I knew that. And I think it was about that same time where I had learned that Jeanette McCurdy actually wrote a book. And I didn't even actually have any intentions of reading it, but then I guess I heard a lot of people saying how good it was. And this book, I would say, kind of stems from that issue. However, it is not really about that. She doesn't really talk about her experience on Nickelodeon at all. There is obviously some mention of her time on Nickelodeon, but the main focus of this story was her relationship with her mom, which started even before Nickelodeon. And it is gritty, it is raw, it is honest. Even when it's ugly and probably uncomfortable to admit that some of these things happened. For instance, her mom apparently would make, there was no privacy allowed in their home, and she would make her and her brothers shower together, and she would stand in the room while they're showering, or she would make the mom would stand in the room while her daughter was using the bathroom. There was no privacy. The deep psychological position, I guess, that put on her is, in a way, she knew that it wasn't right. She wasn't happy with it, but it was her mom, and she felt that her duty was to make her mom happy. So then she got into acting, and her mom also taught her how to have an eating disorder so that she could stay small so that she could get the roles, because apparently if she developed into an adult and a woman, that she would no longer get the roles. And she was also put into the position that all of her money, she was the breadwinner for their family. That stress was put onto her. It was her duty to make sure her family could survive. This really, really messed with her, and that's what this book is about, and it is so good. So I do think, though, that Jeanette McCurdy, she says that there was a point where she hated acting, but she had to do it anyways. But I think that she should pursue writing, because I just think that she has such a way with words, with tone, with meaning. And while you might be at your best writing when she's writing something so personal, I would just love to see her maybe expand and write more, because this book was so personal, raw, honest, empathetic, humorous, deeply psychological. Like, she really got a really good understanding of that, or conveyed that. Even if she herself doesn't quite understand it, as the reader, we could see how that all affected her on like a deeper psychological level. The next one was Fahrenheit 451 by Ray Bradbury. I looked everywhere for my copy. It's hiding somewhere, I don't know. But this, I've always held this book up as on a pedestal since I was really young, that this is a favorite book, and I realized I wasn't 100% sure I even remembered it. So I ended up giving it a reread this year, and it's even better than I remembered. And maybe why I have a special love for science fiction and dystopian novels. But upon rereading it, I was actually surprised that I loved it so much as a child, because there was a huge portion of this book that I felt was maybe more geared towards adults. So you're following Montag. I have the hardest time pronouncing his name, but Montag is a fireman, but in this dystopian world, they don't really need firemen anymore because houses just don't catch on fire, that sort of thing. So instead, they burn books. So the firemen go and collect books and they burn them. And they also police anyone who has illegal books. But in this world without books and creativity, you also kind of don't have love. And Montag is married, but he and his wife are like terrible. Like, I don't think they even like each other. The way they talk to each other, the way they just, there's like absolutely no passion there. They just exist to exist. And one day Montag meets a young girl. I don't know how old she was. I don't know if she was like little and it was just a human, or if it was a love interest potentially. They don't go there or anything like that, but he meets this girl. I don't know how old she was. She is so weird to him because she looks at nature and she's alludes that she reads books or she knows these stories, and she is fascinated with like these little things that Montag never stopped twice to think about, and he just becomes fascinated with her and he can't stop thinking suddenly, and he finds a book. And instead of doing what he would normally do, is maybe burn it, collect it, turn it in, find out who had it or whatever, he ends up hiding it. And this action takes his life onto a completely different road. The next one is Thunderhead. I know that this is the second book in a series, but this book was so good. I can't make it through this year without just saying how much I loved it. I read the first book, Scythe, several years ago, and I finally got around to reading the second book, and I almost feel like the second book was even better. It just takes what they set up in Scythe and just expands the world in such a different way, but it all works so well, and that's kind of what you want from like a sequel, you know? So incredible. I meant to read the third one this past year, but I never got around to it. So it's sitting on my shelf, like literally behind my head. It's sitting on my shelf on my little stack of like, you're gonna read this book next. I keep it out. I keep it where I'm looking all the time. I can't really tell you anything about this book because, as I said, it is a sequel. If you like Scythe, you're gonna like this even more. This was so good. The next one I put on this list, I couldn't decide whether or not to put it with the 4 stars or the 5 stars, but that is A Discovery of Witches, and I literally just finished this last night, and it deserves a spot on this list. I feel kind of torn about this book because it's not just like super fast paced. It's very slow, methodical, calculated. The overarching story about the witches, the vampires, the demons, this book Ashmole 782, and how all these things happening, like, it is so good. So this follows Diana Bishop. She is working at Oxford. She is a historian. She's very successful. She is doing some research, and she's writing a paper on alchemy. And so she's in the library one day doing some research. She requests this book from the archives. These are books like you can't take from the library. You have to stay in the library to read them and access them. So she pulls this book, and then it's kind of weird. She could tell it's magical, and it weirds her out. She really rejects magic despite being a witch. Her parents died because of witchcraft. Her aunts have been kind of on her about her absolute rejection of witchcraft, but they guess they understand. So she sees that this is a magical text, and she's just like, nope, I'm not having any part of that. She sends it back to the archives, and then she continues on. Well, from then on out, she starts being harassed by demons and witches. Like, they can sense each other, but she's never really had any issues before. Then she feels another witch like trying to get into her mind. And then there's a vampire who is also a colleague, by the way. He starts hanging around the library, trying to get close to her. They end up hanging out a lot, and so goes the story. But this manuscript, Ashmole 782, somebody found out that she was able to get it, and everybody wants their hands on this manuscript because, well, we haven't quite exactly figured it out. We have some theories about why it is so important to the witches, the demons, to everybody. And she is the key to being able to access it because it has been lost for thousands of years or hundreds of years. No one has seen it. So how was she so able to pull it? So everyone is after her to figure out how it was that she found it so easily. And she's not even a trained witch. She can't control her powers. She doesn't use magic or anything. Oh my God. There's so much going on in this. As I said, it is slower paced, it's methodical, but I also feel that to some extent it lends itself to the atmosphere and the setting of the story in a really good way. But sometimes it does kind of drag along a little bit much because we have a lot of just, we're going out to dinner, we're going to have wine, we're having a conversation, we're going to go for a walk. And it's like every little thing is explained, but not even necessarily in a really good, snappy way. But the journey is worth it. It is so good, and I can't wait to continue on with the series. Now, I have a category for 4 stars because just because there are 4 stars doesn't make them any less impactful and any less like favorite books. The first one I have here is The Eyes Are the Best Part by Monica Kim, and this is such a weird one, but I love it. I feel that it's incredibly strong. I've really gotten into different types of horror novels this year, and this was a really big surprise, just how good it was and how gruesome it was. As far as like body horror, it got kind of gruesome, but the stories and the character and the build-up was just so well done that it's become a book that I haven't really been able to quit thinking about. So this follows a Korean American family, and the husband and father of our main character, I think he was an immigrant, and when he came over, he worked really hard to build his business and everything, but then he lost everything. This caused him a lot of grief. So one day her father decides to up and leave her and her mom, and I think she has a sister as well. Anyways, he just up and leaves one day from the family and kind of leaves them high and dry. And this is incredibly distressing to all of them, but mostly to their mom. She's just so distraught, so sad, so lonely, and she doesn't really wait long before she goes out and finds another man. But our main character, I'm so sorry, I can't think of what her name is. Our main character, she hates this man, and the more and more they get to know each other, the more and more it goes downhill. But like I said, I felt that this book was incredibly strong, especially in the horror genre, because the characters were so well fleshed out, and as you get farther along, you kind of see why the father might have just up and left. I'm not saying that it's right what he did, but you can see that the beginning of, you kind of get a backstory on that as well. Yeah, it was good. The next one I really enjoyed, it was such a surprise, was Beach Read by Emily Henry. I am not a big contemporary romance reader. I'm not even a big, as much as I love fantasy, I'm starting to really err on the side of not being like a romantasy kind of reader at all. But this one was such an utter surprise that it has me reconsidering my haste towards the genre as a whole, and I do look forward to picking up more in this genre. In particular, this book I feel was the perfect place to start for me. And it's really ironic because I felt completely called out. You're following two authors. You have this guy author who kind of writes like literary fiction, which I think people kind of consider as being more valuable or something. And then you have this female author who writes romance, and they end up renting out like a hotel, or no, maybe they're both so they're both going through some personal issues, they're both struggling in their fields, and they find themselves renting like hotel rooms very close to each other. So, and they also kind of sort of don't get along. I wouldn't say they're like enemies, but you can maybe think of them as kind of rivals, and they end up creating a bet with each other. So the guy says that romance doesn't really have any value. So because of this, they choose to write each other's genres. So she now has to write like literary fiction. He has to write a romance. In order to learn how to write in their different genres, they kind of go on these little excursions. They're not dates. Anyways, one thing leads to another, as you can tell. This book was also so ironic to me because he's saying that there's no value in romance, and then there is the trope of miscommunication, which I generally really hate, but I felt that Emily Henry really did something good with it. And she took that miscommunication and like made it sense, made it very realistic. It was not stupid. It was not underexplained. It was not for dumb reasons. It was very, very good. I really enjoyed this book, and I want to read more Emily Henry. The next one was Jurassic Park. I ended up reading this as a reading challenge to read my son's favorite, or a loved one's favorite book, and I ended up going with this one. And I did actually feature this in another summer reading vlog. We went on like a road trip to New Orleans, and I was reading this book. I was really surprised by this. It was much different than the movies, and it was much more focused on like the science, the philosophy, the chaos theory. So chaos theory, I felt that was just like some Big Bang Theory stuff that I didn't really think that I cared that much to even learn about it. It wasn't going to affect me in any way. So this book really focuses on this chaos theory, a main character, Malcolm, and I just thought it was so good because it took something that I wasn't even very passionate about, that I feel like written in a different way, I would have been so bored with it I couldn't get into it, but he writes it so well that anybody can understand it. And I guess I just felt like that was a really good experience, and also it was just a really good story. So I love this book. The next book I read was Black Sheep by Rachel Harrison. I've read 3 Rachel Harrison books now at this point, and I think that this is probably one of my favorites. I haven't seen many books that talk about like a cult, and that is something that I went down this really long rabbit hole a couple of years ago, where I kept watching all these like YouTube true crime videos on different cults. And I just find it incredibly fascinating. So this follows a girl that has fled from her family. I think she works as like a waitress or something like that, and she's going about her life. For whatever reason, she's drawn back home, and when she goes back home, she finds herself in the fold of all of what her family is about, and it just kind of goes crazy from there. But it was good. I really liked this book. And it is kind of more difficult to kind of explain more of what this book is about, because I do feel that I kind of went into it completely blind. I didn't even know that it was about a cult when I went into it, and I feel like the less you know, the better. So that's why I'm not really explaining anything else about it. But I do recommend this one if you're into horror. Again, so unlike the other book I read that has a lot of body horror, this is not super gruesome. I think it's more just the concept of like that setting, because nobody, like anything to do with cults should be scary to you. So okay, the next one is A Study in Drowning by Ava Reed. This book was so good. I actually acquired the physical book after I already listened to the audiobook of this, but I'm so pleased because I do think at some point I would like to give this a reread. This book just really affected me. I thought it was so interesting and so unique. Okay, so this follows kind of these, I don't know if like rivals is exactly it, but you're following this one character, Effie. She has always believed in these fairy tales. She has all these dreams of this fairy king and stuff like that. And she is like an architecture. So this specific author, the family has decided to, I guess, have someone come and fix up their house. So she jumps at the opportunity, but she finds herself a little in over her head. Then there is another guy who shows up who's like trying to, I want to say, discredit the author. So they're kind of on the opposite sides here. The job itself, I think that's one of my most favorite parts, more or less, is the job at hand of trying to fix this literal drowning house that's on this cliff or something. Everything that she strongly suggests, like, you need to do this, you need to do that. Main guy of the house that owns a house or whatever is just very reluctant to change anything. He doesn't want to do any of these changes despite the necessity of it. So this is making her job like almost impossible. Like, what is she supposed to do? And you know, so yeah, but really good book. I was actually surprised too because I tried another Ava Reed book, Juniper and Thorn. I cannot get into it. That book does not agree with me because it's got this like whole fairy tale thing going on, but then the romanticy aspect of it just really takes me out of the regular story. It just feels completely out of place. And anyways, but this book is really good. And I have two more books to talk about. The next one is called Foster by Claire Keegan, and this is a novella, and it follows this little girl. I want to say, I really probably should reread it because I kind of forgot some of the details. All I know is that I don't know if the little girl is actually related to the Foster family, but you're following this little girl. I think she goes to stay with extended family, and she's really shy and really quiet, but these people that she's staying with are just so kind and show her love. And it's not even like big shows of love. It's just taking care of her and asking her what she thinks or what she wants, and kind of just basic stuff, right? And you never really know what has happened to her, but of course in the moment it doesn't really matter. And then one day, I guess she starts to kind of open up a little bit and they become really bonded. And one day someone comes to take her back home. I think her mom comes back to take her back home. And that moment in the story, it breaks you. It's really difficult. This is one of those reasons why I love short stories, because while as short as it is, it has such an impact. And it can be like searching for a needle in a haystack, but when you find a good one, like it impacts you deeply. So this was incredible. And the last one I want to talk about is The Last Tale of the Flower Bride by Roshani Chokshi. And I don't really know how to say her last name, but The Last Tale of the Flower Bride. This one I read towards the beginning of the year, and it was kind of weird. Like at first, I didn't think that it was meeting my expectations, but the more I think back on it, it's like become a part of like a book that I keep thinking back on all the time. All year I've been thinking about this book. So in turn, it has become a favorite. So it has made it to the list. Yeah, you're following this woman and this husband, and she's like this mystery, and he wants to know more about her, but she's always very pretty closed off. But something happens in her family, and so she has to run home. And he begs to come with her, so she allows him to come with her. But it turns out there is a lot of secrets and maybe the mystery as to why she hasn't really talked much about her past is caught up in these secrets. So this is beautifully told. It feels kind of whimsical and it's very suspenseful. And how it all unravels, you don't even realize that you have also just read a mystery until you kind of reach the big twist in it and you're like, oh my God. So I just felt that the story was so cleverly orchestrated and it was really good. And that's all the books that I have to share with you for this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, and we'll see you soon. Bye.